Okay, make sure. Okay, great. Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending this virtual session of Simply Reports for Circulation. So over the next hour, we're going to take a look at a couple of patron account, and hold reports, hopefully to widen your breadth of what you can do with circulation-focused reports. So, even if the exact examples we go over today may not be like super relevant to your needs, I'm hoping that you'll at least be able to take something away, learn a little more about how to use the various filters and output options to build effective reports. So this session is being recorded, and the video and the chat log will be sent out to the CCS e-news and posted online on our YouTube channel. And I'm also going to email it out to registered attendees along with a summary of the output and filters we selected for each example. So if you are trying to take notes and find you miss something, don't worry. We will make sure that you have the output and the filters selected for the reports. So one challenge doing this with patron reports is that the reports, they obviously contain patron information. So when we run reports, here we're not going to include the patron information you'll typically use in a report, like a patron name. I'm going to try to keep it minimal. And before I post and distribute the recording, any patron information will be blocked out. So if you're watching this live, you'll see limited patron information. And if you're watching the recording, the patron information will be blocked out. If you have any questions, of course, don't hesitate to ask. Feel free to unmute yourself or put something in the chat box. I am not the most agile yet at multitasking in Zoom. So if you chat, I may not see it right away, but I will try to pause regularly and check the chat. Okay, so we only have about an hour. Let's jump in and get started with our first report. There we go. So with this first example, I want to give you an idea of what a count report can do and how to read them. So for this report, our prompt is that we want to see fees our library posted that patrons have not paid yet. So we're basically looking for a report about how much money is still owed to our library. And we want to break it down by fee category. So we can see how much is owed, for example, for overdues versus for lost book charges. So our first report prompt is we want to see a summary of outstanding fees posted by our library. Let me pop into Simply Reports here. Because we're working with fees, we want to use the patron account tab. So anytime you're working with charges or fees, you'll use the patron account tab. And for this report example, we're not looking for a list of individual charges associated with our group of patrons. Instead, we want a summary of these charges. So list report isn't going to really help us here, but the count report will. So a count report will give us a summary. So let me just click into the patron account count reports. Instead of starting by adding these output options like we normally do, I'm first going to look at this section. Let me scroll my screen down here just a moment. I'm first going to look at this section between output and filters. So starting with selecting either outstanding balance options or history options. And we're going to start here because we first want to tell Simply Reports if we're running a report on current charges or charges that need to be paid, which is our outstanding balance options, versus charges that have already been paid, which is our history options. So you can kind of think of this like when you're looking at a patron's account tab in LEAP, The account summary view displays charges the patron still owes for, and this is what the outstanding balance options looks at. On the other hand, the transaction summary view in LEAP shows charges that have already been resolved, and that's what the history options looks at. Since we want to see fees that still need to be paid, we will focus on the outstanding balance options box. And since we're looking at charges that are still on the patron's card, we're going to keep the outstanding charges options selected. So now that we have that set, now we can kind of look at our report output. So let's just kind of go through. There's some different options here that you probably have not encountered with a patron, just like a regular patron report. So the output options that start with the ACCT or account, these are the options that's going to give you information about the fees. And since we're running account report, what we select is going to depend on how we want to break that summary down. Some of these options, as you can see, can be very specific. So the account transaction options will break the report down by, for example, who posted the fee, which is the account transaction creator name, or how that person was logged in, which is the account transaction workstation. So it can drill down to be very specific. A lot of these are too specific for our needs at this time. What we want to see in our report is a summary that's broken down by fee type. And the output that's going to help us achieve this is the account reason or fee reason. So this output option is going to tell us what type of fee we're looking at, whether it's an overdue fee, a replacement cost, or a processing fee. So I'm just going to select my account reason or fee reason, and I will move it over so it is selected for output. We'll see the same things. Let me just scroll down here. So it's kind of the same things when we get to these options that start with item. So these options are going to provide item record information. And again, since the summary we want is not drilling down that far, we just want a summary of the overall charges. We don't need item level information. So for this report, I'm just going to scroll right past this item info. The next set of output we see are the patron information. And patron information output, it's useful in situations where you just want to see information on like individual users or break the summary down by a group of users. For this example, we only want to see the summary broken down by fee reason and not any kind of patron information. So again, we're going to skip these report outputs. So here's the thing with the count reports. If anyone is familiar with running count reports, a lot of times you keep that output pretty simple. Finally, what we get to, we have a couple of output options with the prefix of sum. And what these options do is add up costs, or in other words, it gives us a summary. There's a couple different ones here, right? You see sum balance and sum transaction amount. So the difference between these two, the sum balance is used when running a summary on current or outstanding charges. So if we're using this outstanding charges selection from our little green box midway, we will use the corresponding summary balance, outstanding balance only. So this is stuff that the patron still has to pay. So I'm just going to select that and move that over to add it to my output. The sum transaction amount, it's used when running reports on these history options. So this summary adds up fees that have already been paid. And as you see, like the nice thing about Simply Reports is that it's going to tell you if you've selected one that doesn't work with your mid-range options, right? So when I selected the history option, a pop-up appeared warning me that I am running a report on outstanding balance options and this one won't work. So The nice thing is you don't have to like sit here and actively think about what summary is going to work for my report. Simply Reports will tell you. Since we want a very simple report, we're just looking for a summary broken down by fee reason. These are the only output that we need. We can now move on. Let me scroll down to our filters. And I'm just going to pause for a second just to see if there are is anything in the chat or if anyone has questions. So let me move on down to the filters. And the thing with count reports, at least in my opinion, is that count reports are most effective when you keep the filters simple. So for our prompt, we said we wanted to see fees that have been posted by our library. And with patron account reports, there's several ways it lets you look at fees. So you see we have patron account filters, we have item filters, and then we also have a category of patron filters. So what patron filters does, and I'm just going to expand this patron filter field. Patron filters allows you to filter down based on patron information. So when you're running an account report, one question to ask yourself is, am I looking for information about my patrons? Or am I looking for information about fees posted by my library? And the approach you take can give you some different results. So if you want information on your patrons, use a patron filter and generally use this patron branch filter. This will limit to your patrons, but it will include fees posted by other libraries. So for example, if a Niles patron checks out at Displanes and now has overdue fees posted by Displanes on their account, if we run a report limiting to Niles patrons, that Displanes fee is going to be included. Now, if you want information on fees posted by your library, we'll instead want to focus on these patron account general filters. And I'm just going to expand that area so we can just kind of see what options are available to us here. So under patron account general filters, this allows you to limit to fees posted by your library, which is this transacting branch filter. When you use a transacting branch filter, it's, like I said, fees posted by your library, and it's going to include other libraries' patrons. So example here, Round Lake runs a report on fees posted by their library, and the report's going to include like Grays Lake patrons who've checked out at Round Lake. Of course, you can always double it up. So if you want to see fees posted on your patrons' accounts that were posted by your library, you can use both filters. For our summary, we want to see fees that are posted by our library. It can be any library's patron, but the fees just have to be posted by our library. So I'm going to use this patron account general filter, use the transacting branch, and I am going to select my library from the list. And today I am going to be McHenry. So again, we're keeping everything very simple. I just have that one filter that I wanted to apply. Using the transaction branch filter is going to give me everything that is posted by my library that patrons currently still have to pay. And now I'm going to click Submit and generate my report preview. Let's just kind of take a peek and look at how to read this summary. So for our account report, it's broken down by fee reason because we use the output option of account reason or fee reason. We have the balance total for each fee reason because we also use that output of some balance. So this is the total amount of money posted by our library and that's still owed. And what the count report also does by default is break down transactions and patrons. So let's look at this damaged or missing case line. I'm going to highlight that here. For this area, for this fee reason, we have a number of transactions of 13. So this tells us that staff have applied 13 separate damaged or missing case charges that have yet to be paid. And the number of patrons tells us how many patrons have a damaged or missing case charge on their account. So even though there are 13 separate charges, there is only 11 affected patrons. So this tells us that we have 1 or 2 patrons who have multiple damaged or missing case charges on their account. So that's kind of in a nutshell how you read a patron account count report that includes a summary. We can always go back. I like how my summary looks, but maybe I kind of want to sort things a little differently. I can click back into my Simply Reports tab. So it keeps my entire report setup preserved here. And then I can always play around with how my output is organized, or I can select a field and move it on over to this far right column if I want to sort it a different way. So I'm going to select sorting by summary balance and resubmitting. And now it will launch a whole separate preview for me. And it's going to sort my summary balance from the smallest charges to the largest charges. So, you can sort and rerun if it helps you visualize data better. So any questions? Let me just kind of check my chat here. Any questions on that first, that first report example? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and move on to our report example number 2, which is a cleanup report example. So our prompt for this one is that we want a list of patrons that have processing fee or replacement charges on their account for items with a circulation status of available. So sometimes, what can cause this? A patron returns a billed item and it's checked in, but the charge is left as is. And maybe it's just the charge is too old to be caught by your library's automated recovery settings, or maybe, staff removed that replacement cost but missed the processing fee. So this report is just going to give you a list of replacement costs and, if relevant to your library, processing fee charges for items that are currently available. And I'm just going to close out my previews here because we don't need to see those anymore. So back in Simply Reports, we're again focusing on fees. So I'm going to remain in my patron account area. For our last report, we wanted a summary, but this time we're interested in a list of individual charges that we can check on. So this time, I do want a list report since I want that itemized list. Again, since we're in an account report, let's just kind of first look at this little box midway between the output and the filters. This one's a little smaller than the account report. All we need to do here is tell Simply Reports if we're interested in looking at the current or outstanding charges, and that's what we're achieving right now by keeping this charges checkbox selected, or if we want to look at resolved charges. And if we were looking at charges that have already been resolved and paid, we will select transaction summary. Again, for this report example, we're looking at charges that are still on the patron's card. So I'm just going to keep my little charges checkbox active. So the output, since we're running a list report, we're going to have a lot more output options than our count report. And for this output, we definitely want enough information, not only about the charge, but the corresponding item and the patron to be able to locate all the records we need. With output, no right answers, no wrong answers. Whatever output you select, it's going to depend on the information that you want or you need to see in your report. So the options we select today, these are just going to be suggestions. The information you may need when you're building this report on your own, you may find that there's like additional options you want to use, or like there's extra options we're adding you don't need. So we're just kind of going to look at some examples of what information that we can get. So again, let's just kind of go through the list here. So our account prefix, again, are our output options that give us information about the charge. I'm going to focus again on this account reason or fee reason. So just like with that count report, this option is going to tell me what type of charge is on the patron's record. And I'm going to select this and move it over to my middle column because I want to see if the listed charges are replacement costs or processing fees. I'm also going to select account transaction balance, outstanding charges only. So this option will tell me how much is still charged to the patron. If you are interested in fees that the patron has already paid, you'll look at history items only. Outstanding charges looks at the amount that's still on the patron's account. And again, you can get very specific with these account information. You can select to see like who posted the account, what data was posted, which workstation, too specific for our needs right now. Now we look at the item options. For sure, for this report, because we're running that list report, because we want to make sure that we have the item information for the fee that we're looking at, we are going to select some item information. So I'm going to at least select the item barcode. If you want to, you can get more specific with like the material type and everything else. I'm also, maybe it will be helpful for us to also look at the item status. So the item status, that's going to be the circulation status. So that's going to tell you if it's available, checked out, missing, repair, et cetera, et cetera. Now, moving along, we have just a couple options that start with this mark prefix. So this is going to give us that title information. There's only a couple options here. We can get the title, the author, and the publication year. So nothing like too robust about the title information. I am going to select title and move that over just so I have more information about what the charge is about. And then finally, we get to these patron output options. So first thing I want to just point out here, the very first patron output option is patron account charges. And you might be asking yourself, okay, what's the difference between patron account charges and that account transaction balance outstanding charges output? Which is a great question. So the patron account charges output gives the total amount the patron currently owes. The account transaction balance gives the amount for an individual charge. And let me run through that one real quick one more time. So the patron account charges is the total amount the patron currently owes, and the account transaction balance output is the amount for an individual charge. So for example, if I have $10 in processing fees on my account, but I owe $50 total, the account transaction balance is going to list that $10 processing fee charge. And the patron account charges is going to show that I have a total of $50 on my card. For this report example, I'm not sure if I really need account charges. I will leave as is. Of course, you can always add it if you want to. And then, of course, we're going to add whatever other information we need about the patron. So normally it would probably be like the patron barcode, the patron name, maybe the patron code. Because we're in this webinar and it's online, I'm going to be very vague and just use the patron ID as kind of like all of my patron, as a stand-in for all of my patron information. And just because I'm just going to kind of resort some things. Let's do barcode and I'll say title, fee reason, balance status. Okay, that sounds good to me. So that's how I'm building my output here. In terms of filters, so again, we've got 3 categories of filters that we're working with this patron account report. We have filters that look at the fee information, so these patron account filters. We have filters that look at the item information, just this one little item filter section, and filters that look at the patron information. So we've got a number of patron filter areas. I'm going to start at the very top and expand this patron account general filters. The first option that we have here is a filter that will limit by fee reason. And this is going to be very helpful for us here because we only want to see replacement costs and processing charges. So I'm going to select the checkbox next to this filter. And now I'm going to select the fee reasons that I'm interested in looking at. So let me scroll down to processing charges, sorry. And if I hold my control button down, I am also able to select additional options. So I can also select replacement cost. When you're running a report for billed items, for lost items, make sure you select this replacement cost option and not replacement copy. Replacement copy is a custom fee field that was requested by a library. The replacement cost is the one that's related to items that have been billed. Okay, so we've got our fees limited down to processing fees and replacement costs. Now for the transacting branch. So again, the transacting branch is the library that posted the fee. We've got a couple ways we can potentially look at this report. So we can look for charges that are library posted by using transacting branch, or I'm going to pop into the item filters, or using item filters, we can look for charges tied to our items. So we can use this assign branch and specify we just want to look for items belonging to our library. Or another way you can look at this is we can look for charges tied to our patrons. So using, I'm just going to expand this patron filters area. So using patron filters, we can specify the patron's registered branch to filter down to just our patrons. So again, whatever you choose here is going to depend on how you want to view the data. So for this example, let's say we want to focus on patrons from our library who have charges for our items. So we want to apply not only the patrons branch filters, so we can limit to our patrons, but also those item assigned branch filters, so we can focus on just our items. So I'm going to just select, and I'm not going to, I don't want to like pick on anyone, so I'm just going to select everyone here. So I'm going to select all branches, and I'm also going to select every library items. So what I'm doing, if you want to select a large range from a filter list, activate the filter, select the very top option, hold your shift key down. So that's the key, the shift key, and then select the bottom of the range, and that's going to select everything in between. Okay, so we've got it filtered down to where we're looking at our patrons and our items, but there's one additional filter we need. So right now, how we have it, we have the report looking for all of items for our patrons, or all of our items, all of our patrons that have an associated replacement costs or processing fee. We don't want to see all of these charges, just the ones for items that are on our shelves. So the last filter I'm going to select is another item filter. And this is where I can choose to limit by a circulation status. So I'm going to add the circulation status of available. So now it's going to limit to replacement costs and processing fee charges for items that are available. Any questions before I submit this? Okay. Let's submit, and it's going to think for a moment. So with this report, what we can see here is what the charge is for. So we've got our fee reason. So it's going to tell us if it's a replacement cost or a processing charge. What the related balance is on the patron's account. And the patron information, and we'll pretend here like we have their barcode and name and whatnot, and the item information. So now we can, get to the patron's account, check the patron information, check the item information, and resolve the charges as needed. Additionally, if you decide you want to double check the shelves for the item, we can go back into our report builder. So I'm just going to pop back into that previous tab. And we can also add an output option for item call number in here. And let me just select item call number. I'll move it over. It's on the very bottom of my list, but that's okay. And I will resubmit that. So now when the preview comes up, we at least have that call number so we can send someone out, check the shelves, make sure it's there, and then remove the charge from the patron's account. So that is just an example of a patron account cleanup report. How are you guys feeling? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and move on. So we're going to move away from these account reports. And our next example is going to be a hold report. So our prompt is we need to contact users that have ready for pickup holds and alert them to service changes. So we want to generate a list of holds with the status of ready for pickup and include their contact information. So let's say our library is closing and we need to contact patrons who have holds ready for pickup. So our branch location is temporarily closing and we're going to transfer all of our ready for pickup requests to the main location. We can use Simply Reports to easily gather contact information so we can let patrons know of the change without having to scan each and every hold to pull up the patron record. So jumping back, close my previous reports, jumping back into Simply Reports, this time because we're talking about holds, I am going to move into the Holds tab. And because we want a list of patrons with their contact information and their holds information, I am going to stay in the holds list report so I can get an itemized report of all those ready for pickup holds. In terms of output, so let's choose some output options that will help us. Again, for output, no right answers, no wrong answers. It's going to be whatever data will help your library. We now see a number of output options that have this prefix of hold. So the information here is gathered from that request record. And these details include things like when it was created, who created the hold, what the hold pickup location is. For this report, I'm just going to scroll down because there's a really great report option here for holds, and that is the hold notification option. So I'm going to select hold notification option and move it over to my selected output. So this way, I can at least contact our patrons as closely to the notification preference as possible. So I will make sure I call the phone call people, email people. Another one that's potentially helpful, the hold request ID. So hold request ID is going to give that request record control number. I like to include this because it allows me to very quickly copy and paste that hold request ID number into the Leap Find tool, and I can get right to that hold request without having to go through the patron's record or the title holds queue. So that can be very helpful. And I am also going to select this hold till date. So the hold till date, that is the date that the item becomes unclaimed. So I just want to make sure that I get in touch maybe with the people whose holds are going unclaimed in the next couple of days first. In terms of item information, so with holds reports, these item outputs can be touch or go, right? So this can depend on whether the request is an item level hold versus a title level hold. So for example, something like the item barcode is only going to list barcodes for item level holds. So even though these requests are already for pickup and there's a specific item attached to that hold, some of these fields are only going to be relevant for item level holds. So I'm going to skip over that item barcode. I mean, it's never going to hurt for you to add the item output options in if you want. Just don't be surprised if you have a whole bunch of blank fields in your report output. What I am going to select though, let me scroll down through my output columns to get to these mark prefix. So again, output with a mark prefix gives us title data. So this is where we're going to select information on, say, the title and the author, and publication date if you need that. For my sample output, I'm just going to choose a title, and I'm also going to select the mark primary type of material. And what this field does, it just kind of gives a very, it tells you what kind of item it is, right? So it's going to tell you if it's a DVD or a book or a large print item. So the mark primary type of material will just kind of give you an overview of what type of item it is. So this way, if the patron has questions like, oh, is that the DVD or the Blu-ray, I can use that to quickly tell them. Finally, we get to the patron area. So this is where we grab information, of course, on patron records. And for this report example, you definitely want enough information so you can contact them. So if we weren't online, I would be selecting their email address. I'd be selecting their name, probably a phone number, maybe their actual street address and city if I was going to provide a mailer. But since, again, we're online, I'm going to leave all that out. I'm just going to add the patron ID number in there. Okay, I will come back to sort here in a second. And instead, I'm going to pop down to the filters. For our filters, we do want to limit to holds that are ready for pickup at our location. So the great thing is this isn't going to require a lot of filters. I'm just going to expand this very first category, this hold general filters here. So just like with the patron account reports, there's a couple of ways we can limit hold reports. So we can limit to pickup library, or we can limit to patrons registered library. And just like the previous examples, those are all under patron general filters. Limiting by patrons registered library will show you your patrons no matter where they're picking up at. So by using this pickup branch filter, this is going to help us limit to holds placed for pickup at our library. So for our example, we're looking for a list of holds ready for pickup on our shelves. So we will use the pickup branch filter. And for this example, let's say, I'm going to just say maybe the Algonquin branch is temporary closing. The other filter that we need to limit to holds that are ready for pickup. The hold status filter is very conveniently located right under the pickup branch. And this allows us to limit by hold request status. So this is where, I'm just going to select this. This is where I can tell it that I only want to look at holds with a status of ready for pickup. So let me select that filter here. So to review our filters, we have 2 filters in place. That's going to allow us to limit to holds for pickup at our library that have a status of ready for pickup. And I will submit. So when we submit, by default, it sorts by that request record ID. It doesn't sort by patron name or by the title or any other output options. It's always going to sort by this hold request ID, even if the output isn't there. So it's a little bit of a mess right now. Let's go back and look at ways that we can sort the report that's going to help us with our project. So I'm going to just tab back into Simply Reports here and think about sorting. For this example, we're using this report so we can contact our patrons either by phone or by email. So one way that can really help us is to sort by hold notification option. So this way, all of the patrons who have a notification preference of email are going to be grouped together, and everyone we need to call is going to be grouped together as well. So I just selected my hold notification option output. I moved that over to my columns selected for sort output. So now when I click submit, it's going to resort my list. So now I have everyone with an email address together, and I have everyone with a phone call together. So one of the limitations of a hold list report is that Simply Reports doesn't pull out the unique patrons. So if a patron has like 3 holds that are ready for pickup, it's going to list that patron, 3 different times. Let me see if I can I'm just trying to see if I catch some patron IDs here. I don't. Usually I get at least like one patron who's like 10 items ready for pickup. So, you're going to see maybe that same email address appear like 3 times in a row. So, what you can do, you can, download that report output into Excel and just kind of use some Excel functions to pull out those unique entities if you want. But now you at least have their email address. You can copy and paste it into Outlook or Libraryware or MailChimp if you're using one of those programs. And you'll have the phone numbers also right in the list, so you can just boom, 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 call your patrons and let them know of the service change. One last thing I just want to mention about hold reports is that this looks at current holds. So once a hold is checked out and is considered fulfilled, it's no longer going to appear in our report. So these hold reports, these are really reflecting that database, that live data. There has to be a request record in order for it to appear in the hold report. So again, once that hold is checked out and considered fulfilled, it's no longer going to appear in our holds reports in Simply. Okay, how are you guys feeling? We're down to our last.
I have a question, Miyako. This is Karen from Glenview.
Hey, Karen, yes.
Hey, so a minute ago when you were showing the sorting, you had chosen hold notification option. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in order to get that list to actually be more in order before even moving it to Excel, couldn't you just do the second item that you wanted to sort by is the hold request ID, and it'll put all those together then, so you don't have to, you'll know the same patron, they'll be grouped that way.
Yes, absolutely.
So you just move that as your secondary, and then now it'll organize it so you can see, so you're only making one call to that particular patron, even if they have 4 or 5 items or whatever. You can see it on the list grouped already.
That is such a great point. Absolutely. So when you sort, you can have a sort and then a subsort. So like Karen mentioned, you can sort like all the phone people together and then have the subsort of patron ID or patron barcode, and it will group, everyone's holds. If a person has multiple holds, it'll group those holds together.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
And I just want to say thank you, Miyako, because I'm literally going to be creating this report later because we're reopening at Algonquin. And I want to, because we have 3 locations. So I want to, because we've been holding our materials at the main and the drive up in the same place. So I'm going to pull I've been trying to create that, who's really wants their materials at the drive up when we go back to that model. So yes, thank you.
Yay, good.
Wonderful thing.
I'm glad this is relevant.
It so is, and I every time I attend one of these, I feel like, man, if I just worked with this a little bit more, I would really, be able to use it to its full, power. So thanks for this.
Oh,
and
good.
I see so many managers here too.
Yay!
It's great.
Yeah.
Over the summer, we did this at Evanston, and when you, I came into the meeting late, I apologize. But when you export to Excel, there's a deduping button too that will remove all of your patrons so that you have only those original patrons. So you could go from 900 holds down to 300. And that's very helpful too if you're doing a generic message.
That is excellent. I knew there were some kind of Excel functions that could help that. I am not the savviest at Excel, so I get very excited when I hear of all these Excel tricks.
Yeah, the deduping was, once I learned how to do it, I was going hand by sorting, and once I learned it, it was the greatest feature ever.
That's great. That is great. Good. I'm glad this was relevant. So let me just pop back in here to the presentation. So I just have one very last quick report example. It's going to demonstrate what you can do with a record set in Simply Reports. And this one is used with the patron reports category. So for our prompt, if I could get to report example number 4, we want to send a marketing email to all patrons from a particular record set. So we're going to create a report from the record set that includes the patrons' email addresses, right? So, let's say, for example, no one did this last summer, but we spent our summer doing an outreach program, and, we want to send everyone who registered at our outreach program a welcome email. So instead of having to click into each patron record individually in that record set to grab their contact information, what we can do is we can use Simply Reports to add in all of the patrons' contact information very easily. So let me go back to Simply Reports one last time. So again, this function is used with the patron report category. I'm going to skip the output just for a moment. We do want a list report, right? Because we want a list of each individual patron and their contact information. The best thing when you are working with a record set in Simply Reports is you only have one filter that you need to apply. And it's found under the Patron General Filters area. It is this very first one. It's kind of hidden between the patron branch, but it's the patron record set filter. So what we do, I'm just going to check the box to activate that. And then I'm going to use the drop down to search for my patron record set. So I have a record set here of test users. So it doesn't give the patron record set ID, it just gives the title. So this is when it's really helpful when staff use that, your libraries through letter codes and your initials. It really helps kind of organize the list a little better. So I'm going to select my patron record set, and that's the only filter I need. So now what Simply Reports is going to do is it's going to automatically take every single patron in that record set and give me my output information for that patron. So now I get the fun part of selecting the output that I need. So, for example, you definitely want maybe patron barcode. These are test users, so I am going to select a couple different entries here. We want to contact them, so I will, get their email address and maybe their mailing address if I was going to send out a mailer. I can get their name. You can add in whatever information that you need. And then when you submit, what you're going to have is this nice little list of an Excel file that you can download and use, right? So I can just copy and paste these email addresses into, my MailChimp or my LibraryWare and send that welcome email blast. This report, it's not just limited to contact information. You can apply, any of these output column filters. So we have things that include like, let me go through my list here, like year-to-date circulation count or patron last activity date. So, with our outreach scenario, maybe we want to see, we spent time like working with these patrons. Are they actually using their card? So we can add in that patron last activity date and submit. And now I can see, our outreach was pretty successful. I have a whole lot of patrons who've been using their card in the past couple months. So, there's a lot of really fun things that you can do with a record set and that Simply Reports output. Okay, so that was, again, just a very fast last example to go over. We have just a couple minutes left, so I do want to see, does anyone have any questions? Before that, if anyone does want to take off and go and not stick around for the questions, I just kind of want to reiterate, we'll send out the link to the recording. It should be available for tomorrow's CCS e-news, and I'll also email it out to the list of registrants. The recording will also be posted to our YouTube channel, so if any of your colleagues want to come back and watch this at a later date, they absolutely can. And of course, if you're playing around and later you find you have questions, you can always email help@ccslib.org. So at this time, I am just going to stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions. And I do have some chats. I'm really sorry. Like I said, I'm not good at checking the chats at the same time. We have a question here about on the holds report, can we limit to just one day's pick? Oh, and Gretchen found the answers. Yes. Let me share my screen once more real quick and take a look at hold reports. So there are definitely hold report date filters if you need to. You can limit by a certain date, and just to kind of run through some different dates here. The activation date is when the hold is active. So if it's suspended, this is when it's unsuspended. The expiration date, that tends to be when if the hold never get fills, it will expire generally 1 year after the activation date. And then you can use the last status transition date too, if you wanted to just say, anything that was had their status last updated, within the past 2 days, you can enter those dates in there. Can we do a quick sample for how many new cards have been created in a certain month? Yeah, let me see here. So that would be probably a patron. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I realized didn't even share my screen again. So that'd be a patron report and a patron account report, or I'm sorry, a patron count report. Let's look at filters first. So we probably want patron branch, right? Because you just want to focus on cards registered to your library. So you select your location from patron branch. And then we can use one of these patron date filters or patron relative date filters to say use the registration date. So let's say we want patrons registered like 1 month ago and our run date. And then in terms of how you want to divide this up, maybe you want to break it down by patron code, you can do that. Patron stat class, you can do that. So let me just submit this. So there's been 35 new patrons registered in the past month at Fremont. I will say this though, this number is going to give you the brand new patron records that were created. What Simply Report can't do is it can't tell you how many patrons had existing cards and then came to the library and re-registered to maybe they moved from ELA to Fremont and they re-registered as a Fremont patron. Because that record already exists, it can't give you that information. So I definitely suggest referring to the web report, the circulation statistics web report, because that at least gives a way to break it down and not only give you the new registrants, but also those that have re-registered their card in the past month. Does that include reciprocal and Fremont? That's a really good question. Because reciprocal borrowers are registered to the branch of CCSB, this one does not give you non-CCS reciprocal borrowers that were registered at Fremont in the past month. So I will say, I'm just kind of going through and just kind of seeing if there's a way to manipulate that. I don't think there is here. So there's definitely some limitations. Yeah, definitely some limitations on the type of data that Simply can generate. That was really good questions, Marguerite. Thank you. I just realized I don't have my video on either, so there we go. Any other questions before we conclude the session? Well, I would say I'm going to stop. Oh gosh, I'm going to stop recording at this time.